Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So taking our seemingly now constant series, who's Nintendo suing this week and why are they suing them? And we've got a double header for you guys today. We have two different lawsuits to talk about, both coming in from Nintendo, and that should come as no surprise because they seem to be trying to set a land speed record for the most lawsuits against everyone else that a gaming company has ever filed in a year. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But honestly, this is just getting wilder and wilder every single week. It just seems like Nintendo finds somebody new to sue. And while they definitely do have a case in both of these instances here, you have to ask yourself, is it really worth all the bad publicity for them actually going against all of these different companies and different creators, trying to just basically knock down anything they do not like? They're constantly in the news now, and it's all about lawsuits, kind of taking the oxygen out of the room when it comes to Switch 2 news. And obviously we've covered in its entirety all of the different emulation lawsuits, and Nintendo has gone and won basically in settlements. It's been an absolute bloodbath when it comes to emulators. But now Nintendo is suing the accessory manufacturer Genki, not the game developer, at least I don't believe they are the same, for showing off accessories at a trade show before the Nintendo Switch 2 was announced. And obviously the Nintendo Switch 2 was announced in the Nintendo Directs. We have the launch date for Switch 2. All of the Switch 2 pre-orders have come and gone. It's basically done and dusted at this point in time. But Genki showed off some 3D models that were basically trying to say they had seen the Switch 2 before anyone else had, and they were able to actually create accessories for it. And this was basically in all of the news, but you'll see here that Nintendo's taken legal action against the manufacturer Genki for showing off the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 early. And while their details weren't 100% correct, apparently they were correct enough for Nintendo to decide to file another lawsuit. And honestly, that's really not surprising. Nintendo finds every single reason to file a lawsuit these days. It seems like every time Nintendo gets successful with a console, they just go absolutely after everyone. And when they're not successful with a console, something like the Wii U, they basically just lean back and kind of try to be a little bit more chill about things. And while the launch library for the Nintendo Switch 2 seems to be shaping up to be a fun time, everything else around Nintendo's behavior just absolutely keeps getting worse and worse, at least in my opinion. But basically what happened at CES was Genki at their booth said that they had seen a Switch 2 early, they had access to it, and they were able to basically create a mock-up. Now honestly, if we're being entirely truthful here, this is a very stupid move on the part of Genki. They are not a large company, and there's no way in hell they're going to be able to fight Nintendo on this one, even if they wanted to financially. And honestly, it kind of just seems like a losing case off of the top. They showed up all these different mock-ups with measurements as well, but I guess the question is it really beneficial for Nintendo to try to hammer against every single person they have a case against? What does it matter that an accessories manufacturer basically tried to say that they had seen mock-ups of Nintendo Switch 2 and showed off a couple very janky 3D prints? Yes, they went early, yes, they showed things that they probably weren't supposed to show, but at the end of the day, you always have to ask yourself, this is something that you would do in any business. You'd ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze? And that is to say, is this lawsuit going to benefit Nintendo enough to kind of buy back all of the bad publicity they're going to gain from it? Because honestly, in the court of public opinion, Nintendo is losing every single day of the week and twice on Sundays, and trying to sue a case manufacturer basically into the ground with what they want just makes them kind of look a little bit like the schoolyard bully who just wants to basically beat everyone down unless they have an opinion or a decision of their own. And like I said, on Genki's end, this was probably a very dumb idea. They wanted to be the news, they wanted to make the news, and they wanted to hype up excitement for their products and their company based upon the back of a yet to be announced Nintendo Switch 2. And while it was effective and they did buy all that press for free by showing the mock-ups, now they're probably going to have to pay that press back with dividends as far as what Nintendo's actually asking of them, which we'll get into a little bit in the video. Let's talk about the main thing that really made Nintendo upset, other than the fact that Genki was stating that they actually had access to an early Switch 2 model. And that is going to be this 3D render here, not so much the render in and of itself, but what appears at the very end of it. I want you to think to yourself, if you ever watch television, if you watch movies, do you notice that there's a lot of imaginary made-up brands for basically everything under the sun? You watch a TV show and they open up a beer and it is a completely made-up brand. You watch The X-Files and one of the most famous fake brands out there was Morley cigarettes. They did not exist outside of the world of the actual X-Files show. But as that 3D model turned, and I'll show it to you again, you see the Nintendo Switch 2 logo. Nintendo. Now that is something that Genki should have never put in the video, even if it only shows up for like 12 frames, because that is one of the cornerstones of Nintendo's lawsuit against them. They are using all the logos and all the imagery of things that Nintendo would own, and honestly, they aren't getting anything out of doing that. You would have completely understood from this 3D render outside of the Nintendo Switch 2 logo exactly what you were doing, so that 12 frames right there might cost them the entire lawsuit, at least in one of the portions. And I talk about the fact that they stated that they had access to the Switch 2, and that they could claim with good faith that they were basically illicitly obtained a Nintendo Switch 2, or proprietary technical information. It gets into a lot of legal verbiage, but basically what Nintendo is saying, you couldn't know this because we didn't tell it to you, so you were either lying and taking advantage of our name to gin up business and publicity for yourself, or you were able to obtain a Switch 2 illegally through some other deck channel means, and that's what you did that was wrong. But again, that Nintendo Switch 2 logo showing up on this 3D render is 50% of Nintendo's overall lawsuit, and they basically have them dead to rights on that one. And they talked about that they showed it off at this trade show with that 3D printed mock-up, and Genki boasting that it had that early access to the unreleased console, and they even allowed guests to hold it and measure the mock-ups, which we showed you in previous photos. So basically Nintendo is upset here. They didn't sue back when this was announced because that would basically acknowledge that Genki knew something that they didn't want to get out. This is the type of thing, maybe you just let it slide, you let it kind of go under the radar and just let it just basically disappear. But Nintendo can't do that. Anytime they see some sort of bullseye on a company's back because they've done something Nintendo doesn't like, they take that bullseye, they get out the elephant gun, they load it up, and they try to obliterate absolutely everything that they can possibly see. And that's exactly what you're seeing here, and I have no idea how much money Genki has, but it seems like Nintendo is definitely trying to destroy them as hard as they possibly can, even mentioning that this render ended up on Reddit in a community thread, so Reddit was mentioned in the lawsuit as well, always fun. And then Genki did other things, kind of funny, kind of cute, but also probably pretty stupid, kind of emulating the Nintendo Direct logo in imagery for a Genki Glitch 2 Direct. Again, probably not something that I would recommend if I was sitting in the office. You see the logos here, and they look so incredibly similar to Nintendo Direct logos, and obviously the number one way that you get information from Nintendo as a consumer are those Nintendo Directs. So Genki basically trying to make it seem like they're doing their own Direct. Nintendo is going to claim in the lawsuit, as they did, consumer confusion. They're basically trying to say that your average consumer would be fooled by that logo and would think that Nintendo was putting that Direct on because they're trying to basically make it look like a Nintendo Direct. And you'll see here they're talking about materials bearing or using plaintiff's Nintendo Switch marks under any other mark, name, or design. Now in bonus Nintendo lawsuit, they have also sent a subpoena to Discord to try to get the name, phone number, and address and information of whoever leaked all of the Pokemon information last year. And if you missed the terror leak, it was an absolute mess for Nintendo. So much information, so much source code, development builds, and everything else just basically popped out into the world. But this again is just proving that Nintendo will not let anyone get away with anything. I highly believe that there are just roving bands of Goombas out there in some sort of Cadillac just waiting to get out of the car and beat your knees in with pipes, and maybe there's some Toads out there as well doing drive-bys. You never know what Nintendo's up to, but you can definitely tell that they are watching absolutely every single thing that could be happening, and they are going to sue everyone that does anything they do not like. They have proven that over the last basic 12 months. If Nintendo doesn't like something, they're going to try to ruin you in court. And even though the two lawsuits here, Nintendo seems to have a decent case at, and I'm sure they would win, and this will probably settle long before it goes to court, it is one of those things. They just basically can't stop suing people, because for everything like a leak, there's stuff like the Pal World and Pocket Pair patent infringement suits, which I think Nintendo should absolutely lose hands down 100%. It just seems like a very capricious lawsuit that's doing nothing but trying to bully a competitor. I know there's a couple of people in the comments that always defend Nintendo and say they deserve to win this. Just remember, you can be a fan of something and still say the company that made it is wrong. But honestly, if you ask anyone who with a legal degree who dealt in patent law, they would say that Nintendo's case is extremely flimsy and it probably would not be a win. But of course, Genki is the one that's really in Nintendo's bullseyes right now, because they are asking them to destroy every single Switch 2 accessory they've manufactured, and that seems to be, at least according to the lawsuit, not just things that were mock-ups of the proposed prototype they saw, but anything they've made. And they're also asking for monetary damages for the court to decide, as well as lawyers' fees. I have no idea how much money Genki has in cash on hand in the bank, but I can tell you right now, it sure as hell isn't anywhere near the same same amount as Nintendo. We're probably talking less than 1% of the overall cash haul that Big N is sitting on right now. So it just goes to show, at least at this point in time, do not do anything Nintendo doesn't like. If you're a company, if you're an individual, if you're just thinking about talking about a Nintendo leak online, I would stay away from absolutely anything you think would make Nintendo upset, because they got a team of lawyers and investigators out there looking to file lawsuits for absolutely everything. They do not let anything go, and I'm sure we'll have another part in this series soon, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.